The snow fell thick and quiet over the courtyard of Wintergate as Lord Harwin Blackridge stood at the high tower, watching the frost creep across the stone. His cloak, marked with the silver direwolf of the north, flapped in the wind. He looked every bit the loyal warden of the north, stoic, cold, and fiercely unyielding. But what stirred beneath his calm face was not loyalty. It was calculation. The South had always trusted the North for its oaths. For centuries, the lords of Wintergate had stood by the throne through war, rebellion, and famine. But trust was a fragile thing, and Harwin had grown tired of bending the knee to kings who saw the North as nothing but a frozen backwater. A line had been crossed the day his brother was hanged by order of the Crown for defending their border, without permission. That day, something inside him had shattered. No raven had flown to the capital. No outrage had been spoken. Harwin simply bowed his head at the royal summons, offered his sword, and pledged loyalty once more. But in his heart he began to carve another oath, one written in blood and frost. Queen Meryn of Eldora, ruler of the southern kingdom, believed. She had the North's undying loyalty. She had been raised with tales of the northern honor, how their word was stronger than iron. Her court trusted Harwin. They even sent him gold, grain, and troops to guard the borderlands. But those troops were being trained in secret tunnels, and the grain was feeding an army that did not wear the Queen's sigil. It began quietly. A merchant caravan burned down near the southern pass. Bandits, they said. Then 3 southern. Knights vanished while on inspection near the Vale. Wolves, perhaps, when Queen Meryn sent her most trusted advisor, Lord Garin, to inspect the North's preparations. He returned with glowing words. The North stands firm. Harwin is loyal. He had no idea that the wine he drank at Wintergate was laced with just enough of the slow poison to rot him from the inside. Too slow to trace, too cruel to stop. Harwin stood at the heart of a lie so carefully built it breathed like a beast. Every bow he gave the Queen was fake. Every soldier he trained was fed a different truth. The South sees us as tools, he told them. They want our blood but spit on our names. But we are not their hounds. We are wolves, and wolves do not kneel forever. His daughter Lyra watched him with wary eyes. She was young, barely 17, but her mind was sharp. She had grown up on the legends of old northern loyalty, her grandmother's voice whispering of sacred oaths by firelight. If we break our oath, we become like them, she once said. Then what's the difference? Harwin had no answer for her. All he knew was that a storm was coming, and it would not be gentle. On the eve of the Queen's annual envoy visit, Harwin held a feast. The great hall glowed with candlelight, the smell of roasted boar thick in the air. Minstrels played, lords laughed, and goblets were raised in honor of the Queen. But beneath the table, secret scrolls passed from hand to hand, maps, positions, numbers. A rebellion was forming in the shadows of the North, and none in the South could see it. But not all were blind. In the capital, a spy named Idrun watched the North's silence with growing suspicion. He was old, nearly forgotten, but his instincts were still sharp. He noticed the strange pattern in reports. Too neat, too flattering. No real issues, no real flaws. He remembered Harwin's brother, remembered the cold rage in Harwin's eyes at the hanging. A man does not forget such things, Idrun muttered to himself. He warned the Queen. She waved him off gently. Harwin is proud but loyal. He has never betrayed the crown. Idrun nodded, but he began writing letters of his own. Letters not to kings or generals, but to men who remembered what betrayal tasted like. He was going to dig deeper. Meanwhile, in the north, Harwin walked into the crypts beneath Wintergate. The cold down there was different, deeper, older. He stood before the tomb of his father, who died serving the crown during the Southern Wars. You bent the knee, Harwin whispered. You died for their wars, but I will not. He placed a bloodied hand on the stone and made a vow. Before the next snow thaws, the North will be free, and if they call it betrayal, so be it. Let the world burn before I bow again. The die was cast. The North's loyalty was no longer a shield. It was a sword, sharpened and hidden, and soon it would strike. The first flakes of a new snow began to fall as the Queen's envoy arrived at Wintergate. 36 royal guards, dressed in the silver and crimson of Eldora, rode through the ancient gates with banners high. Their leader, Sir Calrin Thorne, was a rigid man with eyes like stone, loyal to the crown and unforgiving to its enemies. He had come to renew the Queen's trust and assess the North's preparedness, unaware he was riding straight into the jaws of a trap. Harwin greeted him with a practiced smile. Winter greets the South warmly, Sir Calren. You're just in time for the Frost Festival. His voice was smooth, his words dipped in honey. Behind him his commanders stood silently, their faces unreadable. Sir Calren stepped down from his horse, giving a nod. I'll require inspection of your troops, Lord Blackridge. The Queen wishes for reassurance. He paused, letting his gaze linger on Harwin. There have been murmurs, disappearances, fires. Harwin did not blink. And we've heard of pirates on the southern shores, yet we do not blame your queen for every storm. He turned with a sweep of his cloak. Come, eat, rest, then see all you desire. The North hides nothing. That last line nearly made him choke. The envoy was shown to guest chambers, lavish and warm, their every need met. Harwin gave them food, drink, music, comforts meant to dull suspicion. But every servant in that wing was his. Every goblet poured was watched. The southern soldiers never noticed how their horses were led far from the stables, or how their weapons were subtly repositioned overnight. Lyra stood at the edge of it all, silent, watching the careful dance of deception. She had grown cold toward her father lately, unsure if she feared or pitied him. There was a moment that evening when she found herself staring at the envoys. Captain, a young soldier named Darren. He was kind-eyed, polite, and nothing like the monsters Harwin described when he spoke of Southerners. She wondered if her father had gone blind to humanity. You look sad, Darren said gently as he passed her in the corridor. Lyra blinked, startled. No, she replied too quickly. Then after a pause, only cold. He smiled, unaware of the storm building around him. We Southerners have a saying, cold hands, clear hearts. I think it fits you. That night, Lyra sat alone, staring at the frost on the window. She wanted to believe in her father's vision, a free North, strong and proud. But the longer she looked at the Southerners, the more she wondered, were they really tyrants or just strangers they never tried to understand? In the great hall, Harwin met with his inner circle. Maps were unrolled, troop positions marked. One by one, northern lords pledged their part. Some were eager, others nervous, but all knew there was no turning back. We strike at dawn, 10 days from now, Harwin said. When they ride south, they carry lies. Let them speak of peace while we sharpen our blades. One lord, older and weathered, voiced what many feared. And if we fail, Harwin's eyes were steel. Then we die on our feet, not live on our knees. Back in Eldora, Idren received no reply from the Queen. Frustrated, he went to a different contact, General Salon, a grizzled war veteran who had no love for politics. Salon read Idren's letter twice, then stared into the hearth. If what you suspect is true, we're feeding wolves with our own meat. We need proof, Idren pressed. Real proof, not hunches. Salon leaned forward. Then I'll ride north myself, as a friend, as a guest. If they're lying, I'll see it. The clock ticked. Winter thickened. The queen remained, blind, basking in her court's comfort, while the north gathered like a storm cloud. 10 days. That was all Harwin needed. 10 days before the snow would run red, and the south would learn that not all oaths were given in truth. And in those 10 days, Lyra would have to choose where her heart truly lay, with her father's vengeance or a future shaped by peace. The mask of loyalty still held, but cracks were beginning to form, and what lies behind it was war. The cold had become constant now, seeping into every crack of stone and skin. Even the fires in Wintergate's hearths couldn't beat it back. Outside, snow blanketed the walls like a burial shroud, muffling sound, softening footsteps, hiding secrets. Inside, preparations continued behind polished smiles and welcoming feasts. Lyra walked the ramparts that night, her breath fogging the air. Below, she could see northern soldiers training in the yard, but it was all an illusion for the southerners. The real army trained far from Wintergate, in the woods, in caves, in ruined outposts long thought abandoned. Her father's rebellion was vast and far-reaching, a beast waking from years of silence. She wasn't supposed to know about it all, but she did. She had found hidden letters, overheard whispered conversations, watched her father's trusted men vanish into the forest with weapons and gold. The truth sat heavy on her chest, like a weight she couldn't shift. That evening she found Darren again. He was standing by the stables, brushing his horse. When he saw her, he smiled, genuine, soft, unguarded. "You're always walking alone," he said, offering her a bit of jerky. "A little meat might warm you up." Lyra hesitated, then took it. "You're different," she said quietly. He raised a brow. "Different from what?" From what they say about Southerners, about your people." Darren chuckled. "Let me guess, spoiled, arrogant, sun-chasers." "Something like that," she admitted. He leaned against the post, voice softer now. "Funny. They say the same things about Northerners, that you're cold-hearted and born of ice. But you have fire, I see it." Her heart ached. She wanted to tell him, to scream, to warn him that every friendly word and shared meal was a lie. But she couldn't. The moment passed. Inside the great hall, Sir Calrin had begun to notice the cracks, the way certain doors were locked when they shouldn't be. How some faces disappeared for hours with no explanation. He wasn't a fool, and he didn't trust Harwin. That night, he ordered one of his men to follow a servant into the lower levels of Wintergate. What that soldier found would never be known, because he didn't return. Harwin was informed immediately. He didn't flinch. "The South must not suspect a thing. We are close now, too close." But Lyra had seen it happen from the shadows. The guard strangled and his body hidden beneath the old grain cellar. She turned and ran, hands trembling. Her world was splitting open, and she didn't know which way was down anymore. In the capital, Queen Merin finally read Idren's second letter. It was desperate, pleading, and filled with warnings. For a moment, she doubted. But pride is a cruel thing. She tossed the letter aside. "Harwin is loyal, I know the North." But General Salen was already on the road, riding fast through the snow, heading into the mouth of the storm. On the 7th night, Lyra came to her father's war room. "You're going to start a war," she said plainly. Harwin looked up. His eyes were tired, hollow. "It's already started, girl. We're just waiting for the scream. You'll kill them, all of them, even those who've done nothing wrong." Harwin stood slowly. "They hung my brother like a dog. They sent our sons to die in their wars. You think they care for justice, for innocence?" Lyra's voice broke. "And what will you become, father? When this is done, if it's done, who will you be?" He didn't answer. Couldn't. That night, Lyra made her choice. She penned a letter by candlelight, sealed it with wax, and slipped it into Darren's saddlebag just before dawn. It was a warning. The southern envoy would leave in 2 days. If they rode fast, they might reach the capital before the rebellion ignited, if they trusted her. As she watched the snow fall the next morning, Lyra wondered if she had just betrayed her family or saved her soul. And far away, Salem was getting closer, unknowingly racing toward the very heart of the lie. The dawn broke in blood-red streaks. Across the sky, as if the heavens themselves foresaw what was coming, the north, wrapped in layers of snow and silence, continued its quiet descent into betrayal. Darren found the letter while preparing his horse. His hands froze the moment he broke the seal and read Lyra's handwriting. Each line was brief but cut sharp. "You are not safe. Leave before the 10th dawn. Tell the Queen. Trust me." There was no name, no signature, but he knew. He folded the parchment and glanced around. The stables were quiet, too quiet. He slid the note into his boot, heart hammering. He didn't know if it was a trap, a test, or truth, but his gut told him to believe it. Inside Wintergate, Harwin finalized the last phase of his plan. The southern envoy would be allowed to leave peacefully. They would carry tales of a loyal north, reassured and calm. But before they reached Eldora, riders in the forest would find them. The message they'd carry would never arrive. "Let the world think we stand with the crown," Harwin told his war council, "and then we break their spine." But Lyra was no longer silent. She approached Sir Calrin just after nightfall. She waited until his men were drunk with northern mead, singing songs in the hall. When she pulled him aside into the narrow library corridor, her face was pale. "There's something you must know," she whispered. His hand moved toward his. "E blade. What is it?" "My father, Lord Harwin, is planning an uprising. When you ride back, they mean to kill you. None of this is real. The oaths, the loyalty, it's all a lie." He stared at her for a moment, disbelief in his eyes. "Why would you tell me this?" "Because it's wrong," she breathed, "and because I don't want your blood on the snow." Calrin hesitated. He'd heard rumors, seen too much hidden behind Harwin's polished words. He didn't want to believe it, but his instincts flared like fire in his gut. Still, he said only, "I will speak with my men." Lyra nodded and vanished into the shadows. That night, Calrin summoned Darren and the 3 soldiers he trusted most. Behind a closed door, he relayed Lyra's warning. Darren produced the letter. Their stories aligned. They knew they couldn't confront Harwin. Not here. Not now. "We ride at dawn," Calrin ordered. "No banners, no farewells, quiet and fast. We must reach Eldora before the war begins." The next morning, they left with the excuse of an early start to visit a border outpost. Harwin didn't question it. He watched them ride out from the tower, his expression unreadable. But he knew. They should have left earlier. Snow slowed them, trees grew thicker, and the northern riders were already waiting. 2 days out from Wintergate, the southern envoy was ambushed. The attack was fast, ruthless. Bolts flew from the woods, horses screamed, blood splattered against white snow. Calrin fought like a demon, blade soaked crimson, cutting down 2 riders before a third pierced his side. Darren dragged him from the chaos, yelling for the others to flee. They escaped, but barely. 3 of them rode on, wounded, broken, carrying the truth. Behind them, the bodies of loyal southern men were buried beneath frost, erased by wind and ice. Back at Wintergate, Lyra stood at the window, watching the snowfall. She didn't know who survived. She didn't know if her message had made it out. All she knew was that the first blood had been spilled. Her father's rebellion had begun. And in the far hills, General Salem reached the northern border. He rode into Wintergate as a guest, greeted with smiles and open gates. But even as he dismounted, his eyes scanned the stone walls, the armed guards, the way their hands hovered near blades. He had seen too many wars not to recognize the scent of treachery. He would not be an easy man to deceive. The Queen still believed in northern loyalty, but war was no longer a whisper. It had begun to howl. The moment General Salen entered Wintergate, a strange tension settled over the stronghold, like a second winter. Harwin greeted him with the same cool grace he showed every southern guest, but this time the weight behind his smile was heavier. Salen was no envoy, no naive diplomat. He was a warrior, sharp-eyed and battle-worn, and Harwin knew it. "We welcome you, General," Harwin said, offering his hand. "It's not often a man of your reputation graces our halls." Salen shook the hand but didn't smile. "I came because the Queen has questions. I'll leave when I have answers." That night Harwin held another feast. Roasted venison, sweet wine, music, laughter, all distractions. Salen watched it all like a hawk, his gaze sweeping from servant to soldier, noting every hesitation, every glance too quickly averted. And Lyra watched him too, from the gallery above, heart pounding. She hadn't known about Salen's arrival until that afternoon. She'd hoped to delay everything, buy time for the South to learn the truth, but now time was running out. Salen was walking straight into the fire. After the meal, Salen requested a private tour of the fortress. Harwin agreed, reluctantly. He offered 2 guards, but Salen declined. "I walk alone," he said, and did so. He moved through corridors like a ghost, peering into armories, counting bows and blades. In the lower wing, he spotted a hallway, lined with fresh logs for firewood, but a closer look revealed scratch marks on the floor, drag marks, as if heavy crates had been moved through often. He followed them. Behind a supply rack, he found a concealed door. Locked. That was enough. He returned to his chambers, quiet, thinking. Tomorrow he would press harder. Tonight he would prepare. But he wasn't alone. Lyra slipped into his room in the dead of night, her face pale, her hands trembling. "You don't have much time," she said. Salen drew his dagger instantly. "Who are you?" "I'm the reason some of your men are still alive," she said quickly. "I warned them. I tried, but now they know. They'll try to kill you." He lowered the dagger slightly, staring. "You're Harwin's daughter." "I'm not my father," she whispered. "Please, you must get out. You must tell the Queen." "It's too late for that," Salen cut in. "Your father has made his move, but I won't die in this cursed place." From the hall came the echo of boots. Too many. Not a patrol. An ambush. Salen moved like lightning. He pulled Lyra behind the bed as the door burst open. 3 soldiers rushed in, weapons drawn. The first didn't see the dagger until it was in his throat. The second caught a boot to the knee and a blade to the heart. The third tried to scream, but Salen silenced him with one sharp twist. Lyra covered her mouth to keep from screaming. "Go to the stables," Salen hissed. "Now!" Together they moved, slipping through servant corridors, avoiding the main halls. Lyra led him to a forgotten gate behind the chapel, one she used as a child to sneak into the woods. They slipped out into the snow just as the bells began to ring. Harwin had discovered the bodies. The alarm roared across Wintergate, soldiers scrambling into armor, torches lit. Salen and Lyra vanished into the trees, snow swallowing their tracks behind them. By morning, Wintergate was in full lockdown. Harwin stood at the gatehouse, eyes burning. Find him. Find them both. He knew now that his daughter had turned against him, and Lyra, hidden in a cave with Salen, shivered, not just from cold but from fear. "You must survive," she told him. "You're the last one who can stop this." Salen, bruised and bleeding, nodded once. "Then we ride, and we don't stop until the Queen knows what's been done." Back in Eldora, Word reached the palace, late, broken, fragmented, ambush, treachery, war, and Queen Merin at last understood. The North had never been loyal. It had only waited. Snow lashed the capital like a curse as Queen Merin stood before her war council, the bloodied remnants of Ceylon's message trembling in her hands. The parchment was torn, soaked, half-burned by the time it reached her, smuggled through dying hands and desperate riders. But the message was clear enough. The North has betrayed us. Wintergate is arming. Lord Harwin marches. She looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. Ready the armies. Across the realm, horns echoed and banners rose. Eldora had not seen war in a generation, but the Queen moved fast. Troops were summoned from the southern hills, rangers from the Silver Forest, knights from the western marches. The South, for all its peace, still remembered how to bleed. But they were days behind. In the north, Harwin had already set fire to the truth. Wintergate's towers no longer bore the Queen's banner. Northern houses once thought loyal stood revealed. House Marrow, House Valin, House Frostmoor, all pledged to Harwin now. It was no rebellion, it was a declaration. Harwin stood on the cliffs of Ironhold, watching his army below, thousands strong, clothed in wolf furs and iron, hungry for a new age. "We do not beg for scraps anymore," he told them. "We take what was stolen. We remind them that the North is not a slave to southern gold." The soldiers howled, but not all howls rang true. Lyra and Ceylon reached the outer ridge of Eldora barely alive. Ceylon had been wounded again in a second skirmish, his arm bandaged. Tight, his skin pale, but he lived, and so did the truth. The Queen met them herself. She took one look at Lyra and spoke coldly. "Why should I believe anything from the daughter of a traitor?" Lyra fell to her knees. "Because I chose to warn you, because I chose the realm over blood, and because you still have time to stop. This before it burns everything." That night the Queen made her choice. She offered Ceylon command of the southern counterforce, despite his wounds. "You ride at dawn. Show them we are not broken." Lyra stood by, unsure if she was free or prisoner. The Queen watched her carefully. "Your fate is not mine to decide," Merin said. "Your choices have bought you a chance. Use it." And so the armies marched. The two great forces met near the ruins of Old Carhold, a place once sacred, now soaked in ice and fear. Snow fell as if to silence the drums of war, but nothing could silence what was coming. Harwin rode at the front of his army, his armor black, his blade cold steel. On the other side, Ceylon stood, one arm still wounded, his other gripping his sword. They stared at each other across the field. No words, no surrender. Then the North charged. Battle erupted like a storm. Steel clashed, arrows flew, men screamed. The ground turned to slush and blood. Harwin moved through it all like a shadow, cutting down knights, pushing toward Ceylon. He wanted the old general dead. It would be the symbol of southern failure, but Ceylon was not so easily taken. The two met in the center of the chaos. Harwin swung with rage, Ceylon blocked with pain. "You should have stayed dead, old man," Harwin snarled. "You should have stayed loyal," Ceylon growled back. The blades danced, sparks flew. It was Lyra who broke the fight. She stood between them, shield in hand, voice screaming, "Stop this, it doesn't have to end like this." But it did. Harwin, in his fury, slashed toward her, not to kill but to shove her aside. Ceylon, thinking she was under attack, drove his blade deep into Harwin's side. The northern lord gasped. Blood poured. He looked at his daughter, eyes wide, not with anger, but sorrow. He fell to his knees. Lyra caught him. "I didn't mean for it to end this way," she cried. Harwin smiled weakly. "It was always going to. I just hoped we'd be free." Then he died. The northern forces, seeing Their leader Fall began to retreat. Chaos erupted, and the South held. The rebellion had ended, but not without a cost. Days later, the Queen stood over Harwin's body. "Bury him with honor," she ordered. "He was a traitor, yes, but he was also a man who fought for what he believed." Lyra stayed in Eldora, not as a prisoner, but not quite free. She spent her days in silence, her nights dreaming of wolves in snow. And though the North returned to the fold, its wounds would never fully heal. For even when peace returned, the question would remain: what if the North's loyalty was always a lie? And perhaps it always had been.